And hello everybody, and welcome to this next part in the Top 11 video tutorial series. In this video, we're going to discuss how to sell your players, as well as when you should sell your players, and some strategies involved in doing these things. So the first thing we're going to talk about is how do you put a player on the transfer market. And this is done quite simple. So I'm going to go here to my roster page by clicking this button. And here's all my players. So if, say, I went crazy and wanted to sell Cubillo, simply click on Contract, click Sell, and you can then set the price. I always set it to be the maximum unless I really want to get rid of the guy quickly, and then I'll set it at the minimum, but there's really no reason not to do one or the other. And he'll appear on the transfer market for some set number of time, and you're done. He would appear here like anybody else, actually here in the auctions list, like anybody else. And either he'll sell or he won't. If he does sell, then he'll disappear from your club when the clock expires and you'll get that money. If he does not sell, then you will get a message telling you that he did not sell, and you can try again if you want. So going back to the roster, the next thing we're going to discuss is how do you use the negotiations list. If your players are on the negotiations list, you can actually get tokens for them as well as significantly more money in some cases. Now, that is definitely to your advantage because your players are there at all times. If I go to the negotiations list, several of these players I've seen here for many days. Why is this? Because they're not going to go away for any amount of time. How do they get there is by being 1 point away from their next star. So this guy, if he gets one more point, he'll become a 70. That's going to be true for everybody on this list. So if you want your players on this list, you need to keep them 1 point away from their next star. Now there's a huge advantage to this, so it's definitely something you want to do. And you can get offers almost any time. You'll see here on my list I have 6 players that are currently on the negotiations list. So I'm intentionally not putting in their training points. Some of these guys I have no intention of selling this season. Some I would definitely sell if somebody offered me a good price. What kind of offers should you accept? Well, that's kind of up to you, and it really depends how badly you want to sell the guy. If it's a guy you really like, then no amount of tokens would probably be worth it because good players are hard to come by. Like, if he was on negotiations, I wouldn't accept any number of tokens. They could give me 100 tokens. I would say no because he's irreplaceable. This guy, 1 or 2 tokens, I would definitely let him go because he's not that great. This guy is a very nice defender. He's been good. I would definitely want something for him. So it's all case by case what offers you should and should not accept. So when should you sell players? Believe it or not, it actually makes a difference how much money you'll get back for your players when you put them on the market. At the time of this video, it's day 19. You can see that right up there. The season always resets every 4 weeks, every 28 days. And the activity on the market varies each day, but it's very predictable each season. The first day or two on the market, everybody's bidding crazy. Everybody wants new players. They've gained a level, so they now have access to higher rated players, and everybody's trying to cash in quickly. You can take advantage of this by trying to sell your players in the first couple of days. By doing this, it could incite a bidding war, especially if you have good younger players that will excite many of the managers who are now eligible to buy those players. It's also not a bad idea to sell at the end of the season if you need the roster space, because players will sometimes be able to be sold at the end of the season as managers are trying to prepare for the next season. So they think, well, I'll just buy a guy now because he'll be cheaper, there won't be a bidding war, and I'll know what I have going into next season rather than take a risk and wait to see what will be on the transfer market at the beginning of the year and have to fight many other managers for a handful of players. So when I want to sell players, I want to sell either in the first 3 or 4 days or the last really 2 days, because if they're on my team, I most likely use them. I don't really have any reason to keep players around just to keep them. And you can see by my statistics, you see pretty much everybody except this guy plays at least somewhat routinely. This guy has no matches played because I just got him a couple days ago, so that's an exception. The rest have been there since the start of the season, so the ones that I don't play or don't perform, I have sold. So, yeah, if they're good enough to keep, then you don't want to sell them until the very end of the season if you're not going to use them for next season. So when should you give up players in the middle of the season? Because I've done that with a couple of players this year. These form ratings pretty much tell the whole story of how your players are playing. If they're consistently getting 7s and 8s, then this is a good player. You do not want to sell this player. If they're mostly getting 6s and 7s, this is not such a great player. So you want to watch this player. If they're getting numbers below that, then it's time to start looking another direction, and you probably don't want this player anymore. Now, everybody's going to have a bad game, so that doesn't mean the first time somebody gets a 5, they need to go. It just means if they're not consistently scoring well, then they should be replaced at some point. A good average would be about 7. Players who are above 7 are worth keeping around. Players who average below 7 are probably not. Now, it varies by position, but that's just kind of a good measuring stick. And you can see the last 5 on this. You can see the whole season on the mobile app if you go to statistics. I know that is true on the old version of the game. I do not know if that feature is still in the new version, but whatever. And I can see, a slightly larger sample size here, as you'd see with this guy. Lots of 9s, lots of 8s, only 1 6. So obviously he's a great player. I think he averages 7.8 this season, so he's not going anywhere. Look at somebody that maybe isn't so good. He's actually my highest rated player, but as you can see, a lot of 6s, some 5s. I'm monitoring this guy and considering whether I want to have him on the team next season, despite the fact he's 6 stars and only needs 1 more point to become a 7-star. But if he's not performing, then sometimes tough decisions have to be made. So the times you want to consider giving up on players is when they're getting a lot of low numbers. The other time is when you've been promoted enough times to where their age and their abilities are no longer able to keep up with the level. A perfect example would be this guy right here. He's still 5 stars. Look how many games he has played for me. He's played almost 300 matches. He's played 296 matches. I've had him since he was 18. He's 25 now. This is his 7th season with my club. He's been absolutely awesome. But you can see here his forms are starting to slip. He's got some 6s. He still has a couple of 8s, mostly 7s, so he's still doing reasonable. But now he's 25, so he won't train as fast. Next season he'll be 4 stars. If I can't get him to 70, then he'll be 3 stars the year after that. So at some point, despite this guy being an awesome player for so long, I'm going to have to let him go because he's just not going to be able to keep up with the rest of the players. Decisions like that would you want to make at the end of the season. You wouldn't sell a guy mid-season for this reason, but eventually all your players are going to become obsolete, and you'll have to make a difficult decision. So that's another thing to monitor is the training speed. If they can no longer train fast enough to make at least 3 or 4 points a season, then they're probably not worth keeping unless they're performing at a really high level. So that's definitely something you want to be aware of. So which kind of players are going to sell quickly and which players are going to be kind of difficult to sell? Well, a good question to ask yourself is, if you saw that guy on the market, would you want him? If the answer is no, then most players aren't going to want him either. So let's go ahead and go to the general information, and that'll give us a pretty good idea of which players will be easy and hard to sell. So obviously younger players are going to be easier to sell than older players because nobody wants to buy a 33 or 34-year-old that's just going to retire after the season. And likewise, people love to buy guys that are younger, fast trainers that they can keep for a while. If I'm going to spend my tokens on a player, I want a guy I can have for at least 2 or 3 seasons. I don't really want to spend a lot of money on a one-season player. So of my guys, if I decided to sell Dolians because I just get tired of him, he's going to sell really fast. He's 18 or 19. He's a super fast trainer, and those are things that people like. The other thing that players like is they want these numbers to end with 4 or 9 because that means they're very close to the next star. Like this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, him, and him. Since they end with 4 or 9, they're going to be at the top of the transfer list if you order by average rating. So those will get a lot more attention. If your number ends with 0, 1, 5, or 6, they're not going to get much attention because they're going to be low-rated players relative to what they can see. So someone like him, he's only 65. I probably couldn't sell him right now, at least not very easily. I would be able to sell him for another reason, but it would be more difficult than if I'd left him at 64. But since I'm planning on keeping him, I didn't care. The other thing people like is they love special abilities, especially the useful ones. Now, if you're not sure which ones are useful and which ones are not, go check out my other video on special abilities, and that'll tell you all you need to know about these guys here. So which one of these are good? Well, this guy here, I just bought him even though he ended with 5 because I wanted that, and I didn't want to spend a ton of money, so I was cool with that. These guys are going to, you can always sell one of these guys or one of these guys. Those guys go really fast. Aerial defenders and walls just go flying off the shelves. Also, free kick specialists. Everybody wants those on their strikers, so I could sell this guy in a heartbeat anytime I wanted. And those add no value, so I wouldn't want that, but some people do. So really, any special ability, even if it's a bad one, makes your players easier to sell. The other thing to consider is, do they have good stats? Look at a player's stats. If they've been on a team for a while, you can get an indication if they're good or not. For example, click on Dolians. You see his stats? He scores a fair amount for a midfielder. His form ratings aren't the best, but you can look at this guy and say, this guy performs reasonably well. So it's somebody maybe you consider getting. Sometimes you'll be on the transfer market and you'll click on their stats and you'll see 1 goal in 30 matches and then 5 on the form. I quickly click this red X right here and do not bid on that player because if he plays very bad for another team, there's a good chance he'll play very badly for your team as well. So stay away from those players. And if you have one of those players, other managers will stay away from them as well. So guys like that are going to be really, really hard to sell. The other thing that will make your players easier to sell is if they play multiple positions. I got this guy because he plays anywhere on defense, so he gives me so much versatility. I would love to have that guy on my team. There's a good chance somebody else would too. So when I decide to sell him, even though this number ends in a 1, I will have no problem selling because he has 3 positions and he has a great ability. So that will be very easy. The other thing which can make him difficult to sell is if they play positions which are not really that well used. Everybody uses midfield, everybody uses defenders, everybody needs a keeper and strikers. Attacking midfielders and defensive midfielders, a lot of teams don't use these. So if you're selling a player that plays only one position, and it's a position not a lot of managers use, then that's going to be much harder to sell than if than if he was, say, a striker or a defender, because you just don't have near the number of buyers looking for that position. So be aware of that it may take a while. So how do you sell those players? Well, you just have to keep trying. I don't recommend doing something drastic like adding an ability. I would recommend just keep selling the player over and over. Eventually somebody will buy it. It just may take a while. Now, a little note you can see here under the transfer tab. This symbol here means that he's on negotiation and I currently have an offer pending. If there was a picture of a little hammer there, that would mean that I've put him on the market. And it means he may or may not have been bid on. It just means that he is available and on the market. And I can click on that if I want some more information. And you can keep putting the guy on the market over and over and over if you want to. You just have to check to see when the timer expires and then just do it again. And that about covers everything there is to know about selling players. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you will check out my other videos. And I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you very much.